All right, kids, welcome to the lecture hall.
Oh no.
I do have a PhD and I was a graduate student and instructor for a long time, so I'm getting these like academia vibes that I'm really loving.
As a courtesy to the speaker and your fellow attendees, please silence all electronic devices at this time.
Any DMs I may receive during this talk may have a delayed reply.
Yeah.
All right. Where is the screen? It's over here. Groovy. So we're going to try this. It has been a really long time since I've... Whoa.
Oh, we're not in the right order. Uh-oh.
Oh no. Do we need to change?
I think it's on the wrong slide, too, which is not helpful. Oh, yeah, because I need to be, I think, on this window to advance. Let's test. Yes. Oh.
I like the blinky.
How many Mac admins in a room? I think we're good. I think I just had a false connection because I had stuff kind of taught over here. Anyway, thank you so much for joining all of us today. We're hoping to keep this kind of like a loosely structured kind of panel conversation. You'll see we have a great group of folks that we'll go through and introduce, plus a bonus special guest has joined us. So we'll kind of kick things off. We'll go through and do some introductions. I'd love if everyone could talk a little bit about obviously who you are, where you work if you're comfortable sharing your organization, and then just maybe give us a little bit of your Mac admins community history, whether that's through contributing to projects or the Slack or your career or whatever kind of story makes sense to give us context for what we're going to talk about today. So we'll pop over, and I actually will kick it over to Nate to start.
Okay. I'm Nate Walck. I've been doing this since, I don't know, 2011, I believe it is. But so the short version is I worked at the university. They didn't want to pay for anything, so I found open source. I found Monkey, and I've been using it since 0.40 or 0.70. Is it pre 1.0? I don't know. I'm just looking at you for no reason. But yeah, pretty early, and Greg was very patient, and you know, I learned a lot just observing and working with the tools and seeing how the development went and all that, and just been doing it ever since, and said yes to every opportunity that came along, and kind of ended up here. But it's been great, great ride.
I'm just going to go in order that's up here because I just feel like the structure is beneficial. So I'm Dr. K, Emily on Slack. I am an admin on the Mac Admins Slack team. I'm also a co-chair and founding board member of the Mac Admins Foundation, and that's kind of the capacity I'm in here this week at the Penn State Mac Admins Conference. It's my first, which I'm very excited about. I've been working in IT loosely since my undergrad days in college. I was a music major, and I worked in all the music labs, and the music labs were all Mac labs. So I kind of trial by fire learned as much as I could about the platform to better support our students and the MIDI keyboards and the drafting programs used by our acting studio kids writing scripts for black box theater plays and all that kind of stuff. And I've kind of worked my way up through IT. I now manage the client platform engineering team at Jamf in Jamf's internal IT department, where we use their full suite to manage our Macs. And as much as I'm professionally pretty deeply embedded in Jamf in many ways, we all benefit from the open source tools that are built and maintained by the community. And as a member of the Mac Admins Foundation, I feel very invested in making sure that we are here to provide support for community projects, tools, organizing efforts, anything that the community might need to better bolster our profession, to help onboard new professionals, to support people at their organizations. And I'm very, very thankful that we were asked to come have this panel conversation here today to talk about some of the efforts that have gone into the Mac Admins open source project. And we'll get into some details and timeline in a bit here. So next we'll pass it over to Elliot.
Hi everybody, I'm Elliot Jordan, Senior Client Systems Engineer at Netflix. Prior to that, I was at the Lindy Group and Nordstrom and Snap and other fun places. I was on the team that initially developed Autopackager. You may use that. And if so, you're welcome, and I'm so sorry. And then I went on to develop Recipe Robot. Now I help out with AutoPackage, and we just released a new tool called Escrowbuddy that'll probably cover it a bit. But yeah, I'm very invested in Mac admin's open source, and that's really one of the things I really love to do is to work on a new project and give back to the community in a community gap that needs filling.
Greg.
I'm Greg Neagle. I started doing Mac admin stuff back in the early 90s with the Los Angeles Opera nonprofit organization. I currently work for Walt Disney Animation Studios. I've been there since 2001, so quite a long time. I've been using and involved with open source with the Mac for almost as long. Radmind was one of the first open source tools I used to manage Macs way back in, again, the early 2000s. And as our needs changed and that was no longer going to be something that worked for us, I had this strange idea that I could probably write something to replace it for our use, and that was the genesis of Monkey. And I've also released a bunch of other open source tools for the Mac, some of which can still be used, and a lot of which, because of Apple changes or whatever, just is no longer applicable. But unlike, maybe I'm wrong about this, I hear a lot of people who get into the open source, especially on the Mac side, they get burned out, and I don't feel that way at all. I'm very happy to continue to be working with open source and the Mac, and I hope to be able to do it for much longer to come. Who's next?
Let's pop it over to Rich.
Rich. Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Nice.
Nice.
I'm Rich Trouton. I had the good luck to get involved in Mac IT in the late 90s, which, for those folks who remember back that far, that was the perfect time to get involved in Mac IT. So I got my start at the University of Pittsburgh working as a student worker. My choices were supporting System 7.5.3 or Windows 3.1.1, and for those familiar with those two operating systems, there was really no choice. So I chose the Mac, and since then I've worked in advertising agencies, I've worked at government medical research institutions, private medical research institutions, and I'm currently working for a small boutique German software company known as SAP.
And our special guest.
Me? Am I the
Sure,
special
there's somebody else.
Mr. Daw, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Chris Daw. I am a Seattle area small business and K-12 consultant. Been working on Mac since I was a student at the University of Chicago in the 90s, helped run labs at the medical school there, and drifted into professional IT and never drifted out. Currently provide network deployment and other IT management consulting services for small businesses in the Seattle area.
And no big deal, a board member of the Mac Admins Foundation.
That's right.
Did my slides get? No, we're good. So we're here to talk about Mac Admins, the Mac Admins open source project. So I feel like we have to do the token. Who here uses an open source project to do their work at their organization? That is only people that work at a fruit-based company did not raise their hand because it's not open source. Right?
I'm curious who else contributed.
Are there contributors in the room? That's another good one. I would expect our panel to be raising their hands too.
Well, I would say it depends on what you mean by contributed. I have not written a single line of code, but like, for example, in my own workplace, I'm the one who pretty much, in my team that writes open source apps, I'm the one that makes the shepherd. Sorry, thank you. At my own workplace, my own team has written a number of open source applications, including privileges. We just released a tool called Script-to-Package for creating payload-free installer packages, and it's also useful as a general signing and notarization tool. I didn't write a single line of code in any of those, but what I did was that I was the one who worked through my company's open sourcing process to get those through so that they are available to the wider community. So there's all sorts of contributions you can make. Like, do I write AutoPackage? No, I write a bunch of recipes. I think that counts. Yeah.
Yeah. Talking to a patent lawyer also counts.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, for
Do
sure.
do I help update the wiki and the documentation for those tools? That's a important way to contribute as well. Yeah.
So you may not know that you contribute to these open source projects, but if you're doing this stuff, you are.
Mm-hmm.
So we thought we'd take an opportunity here to talk very specifically about how the Mac Admins Foundation and the I don't want to say primary because I don't want to discount anyone's contributions, but there is a core group of folks who have worked very hard to put some organizational effort behind a lot of the open source tools that are used by organizations in our profession. That came under the auspice of Mac Admins Open Source as like a general name. And I kind of want to, before we get into the timeline of how this all came to be, I want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about maybe why it was important to figure some of this stuff out.
Well, you do have a screenshot about this that describes it.
I do.
But mainly changes to Mac OS that required certain things.
Yeah, I'll
okay,
pull
we'll
up
get
your,
there.
I'll
We'll get
pull up
there.
your list.
Yeah,
Here we
cool.
go. We'll just go there.
There
and
we
then
go.
We'll go back and do the cute transitions after.
Yes, excellent. So yeah, there's changes in macOS that require code signing for certain things to work in a way that yielded a good user experience. So that was like the main impetus. And then, but like, to be quite honest, the primary one is, so I had this LLC from when I did like one contracting gig like 5 years ago. And I happened to have a developer account and Eric's like, can you sign Nudge for me? And I'm like, sure, I'll sign Nudge for you. And then that one version of macOS came out, I installed it, and then it popped up and showed my LLC's name. And I instantly freaked out. I was like, what? Do not want. So a lot of this was just kind of trying to get that into an organization with a name that was more appropriate for what it actually was. And also make sure that open source projects didn't feel like they had the liability of having to deal with code signing certs and an Apple account and all that stuff. So corporations can be good, corporations can be bad, but in this case, corporations are being very good for us because it is a good way to control liability issues and also give us a path to providing these services.
Yeah, and from there I'm going to pop back through some of my little animations here. So as you may or may not remember, May of last year, Apple announced two new Apple IT certification courses. It was a support and professional, I think, or the two. And then nestled in the press release was this line about a new group called the Mac Admins Foundation, which is going to help provide vouchers for folks that attest financial need. This is on the Apple Newsroom site. We can send a link out. We have a resource at the end, and we'll make sure slides get out too. This was about 3 weeks before we were planning to press release that we existed as an entity, and part of the history behind that, and I'm glad other board members are here that can kind of chime in a little bit. We were on a waiting list of 9 months? After we did all of the work, all of the paperwork, all the fees, the consultant, the writing the mission, the bylaws, the paperwork, the 1023 form, the DC stuff, we need to have a physical office location somewhere. Why? What's an agent for? And we learned all this stuff. It took forever. Right? And if you want to learn more about that, you can watch the recording of our last session if you weren't there already. We talk a little bit about our first year, including a session that Chris and I did last year for Penn State virtually that talked about the formation of the Mac Admins Foundation. So they kind of, I it's not the best term to use, I admit. They kind of outed us. We weren't quite ready.
They took us out of stealth.
They took us out of stealth mode is a more appropriate term. Yes, thank you so much for that. But we kind of needed somebody to rip the Band-Aid off. So it's kind of, in retrospect, I'm glad that they did. Although I did have to log 8 hours of VTO at Jamf that day because we're like, we need the website ready. We need to get a press release out. We need to get our socials and our graphics and all this stuff sorted. We were not ready for this yet. But anyway, so thank you, Apple, in more ways than one. So fast forward a few weeks. And in our favorite venue to kick around ideas about things, we started up a private channel, and it was the board plus Nate joined, and then a few others joined later. And it was like, hey, we wanted a group to just kind of discuss the potential about something to do to support the Mac Admins GitHub team, right? What can the Mac Admins Foundation do to support this GitHub organization in just the most base sense, right? And so he laid out, like, here's where we're at. You know, WWDC had just happened. There's writing on the wall. We know that being able to establish trust through notarization and signing is going to be important for these tools. And there is that concept of liability about what we're seeing on the certificate, what users see on their devices, what organizations see as something that's deployed in their environment. And what do we do to figure out what our approach long-term is going to be to support these tools that are so instrumental, not only for people that have just actively implemented Monkey at their organization, but we all know that we have vendors that also use Monkey in their products, right? Or we have, at Jamf, we use auto package for our third-party software intake into our server. Like the impact of those tool sets not having support and something happening, or maybe not being able to transition ownership adequately, is monumental for our profession and for all the organizations that we work for, that we support, right? So what can we do? And I want to call out these last 2 bullet points here, because that was a very important thing that we had to figure out right at the top. Yeah. Is the Mac Admin Foundation itself, well, would it want to get a developer account and provide the code signing? To which we said, no, we don't want the liability. However, the whole point of the Mac Admins Foundation was to support the community. And our dream is to have community groups that determine needs for the community, professionally and otherwise, to come to us and say, can you help us financially fund this initiative to benefit the community? So we went to Nate and said, hey, bullet point 2, I think is plan B. I think is what makes the most sense, right? You can form your own nonprofit, a local nonprofit, an LLC, whatever makes the most sense. We will provide funding for all of the fees and paperwork and stuff involved in doing that work, right? So that you can then go get, you have your business, you can go to Apple, you can get your developer account, you can establish a signing identity, and then you can use it in the GitHub projects that are under the Mac Admins umbrella, right? And that's ultimately where we landed. So what I kind of wanted to go over a little bit is how long doing this kind of stuff takes, which doesn't sound as fun, but I think we'll have some anecdotes to share along the way. So we're at June 2022, so we're a little over a year ago. Right? Okay. So we continue through the summer. We start kicking around ideas. So the next thing we had to decide, should Mac Admins open source be its own 501c3 nonprofit? Or should it be an LLC? Or is there something else, right? And then it was, maybe we should go consult a lawyer or somebody who maybe knows these kind of things that would maybe give us some better guidance. And Nate did a lot of that communication, so I want to pass it over to you to see if you had anything to share about that decision.
Sure, yeah. So for my original LLC, for the contracting work, I had worked with a lawyer local to me in Lancaster. And yeah, they helped me sort through it and gave me the pluses and minuses. And given that we had absolutely zero intent of ever making any profits, we did end up going with a PA nonprofit for now. And eventually maybe a federal nonprofit, but it's kind of where we're sitting at the moment. And yeah, it was not, I wouldn't say it was a hard process, it was just a long process. Because, lawyers are juggling a whole bunch of different clients all at the same time. And that's true. So, you have to stay on top of it and ask questions and make sure they're getting back to you. If you don't hear back from them for 2 weeks, you have to ping them, all that stuff. It's just it's very much like chasing down an engineer at Facebook, for instance, to get an answer out of them. It really is. They're all just like this, and you need to make sure that you grab their attention and get them to do what you need them to do, so that you can progress on the thing.
Yeah, I feel like the processes are deeply calendar driven in a way that
Yeah.
Is a slower pace than you're accustomed to when you're working in IT. Things
Indeed.
get scheduled weeks and months out in advance, and you wait for weeks and months for things to happen.
Mm-hmm. Accurate, yes. But yeah, it took a couple months to get the LLC, the nonprofit made, and then. I think one process that was almost as long was the developer account thing, but that was a whole thing to itself for various reasons.
Yeah, we're going to get to that in a
exactly,
bit here
indeed.
in our timeline.
But yeah, as far as just founding the nonprofit, it wasn't too bad. I asked a couple folks who were active on the Mac Admins GitHub if they wanted to be on the board, and we kind of like self-organized around that. And just kind of got people who would be like, it's kind of strategic. It's like people at different companies, so that like if people had to move on or go somewhere that would mean that they couldn't serve, we wouldn't just get whacked with like half the board having to leave or something like that. So we tried to be strategic about it as well.
Who is the current board?
Current board. So that's Jesse Peterson, Eric Gomez, Johan, and myself, and Graham Gilbert. That's the group right now. And yeah, like it's very ad hoc though. It operates almost exactly how it did before. It's GitHub. We have a channel. Hey, I need to do this thing. Okay, let's go do this thing. It's very, very informal still, but that's kind of how the board ended up at the moment and where we are. We do want to like kind of change and grow and evolve as time goes on. But this is where we are at the moment. We are not even a year old. So, we're still kind of figuring it out. And because we are all working full time and doing all this other stuff, it's very hard to even sit and think, much less have meetings about it, much less do all the other stuff. So it has been very slow going, and, intentionally so as well, because if we tried to kind of like did too much all at once, we didn't want to have this huge support burden and then let people down and, that side of things.
Yeah, I part of why I wanted you to mention who was on the board is just to specifically call out that you'll note that there is no overlap between the Mac Admins Foundation Board of Directors and the board of Mac Admins Open Source. And we wanted to do that intentionally because what we want, and a question actually came up in our Mac Admins Foundation session previously about, are there organizations that you would partner or collaborate with that are also not-for-profit, nonprofit organizations? And ultimately, Mac Admins Open Source is a really good example of that, right? We're supporting each other. Right, we are helping seed essentially with funds that came from donations from corporate sponsors, from individual contributors, from folks that bought merch and did all that great stuff that we truly appreciate. And now we can feed it back into the community, founding a new organization to bolster our open source projects and help out our maintainers, right? Which then benefits the community that the Mac Admins Foundation is here to support. So it's truly like a mutually beneficial group there. But we did want to make sure that it was very clear that they are separate organizations, just so that like liability, if anything, right?
Yeah.
So we could probably hop back to the timeline a little bit. Yeah. So I went through our channel in Slack, and I was like, we have all this scroll back, we pay for it. I'm like, we'll look and see what happens. So the first invoice we got was in August, I don't think we paid the first invoice until later that year.
Yeah.
And the invoice was for incorporation fees. I think I have LLC written here. That's technically incorrect. I'll fix that on the slides when they go out. And then figuring out potentially how much an organizational Apple developer account might cost, depending on if they approve, if it's a nonprofit or not, and that kind of stuff. And then also lawyer fees for the conversations that Nate had. And I think Rich gave the dollar amount in our I think it was like $913 was the total that we contributed to fund the efforts to set up the Mac Admins Open Source as a nonprofit in Pennsylvania. By October, so conversation started in June. By October, he had an EIN, an employee identification number from the IRS, and was able to establish a DUNS number. And as those of you who have like business manager, school manager portals know, you need a DUNS number to do all sorts of stuff for these programs that are provided to organizations. And the organizational Apple developer account conversations just kind of continued. I'm usually pretty blunt about how I talk about things. I'm trying to be a little more diplomatic, but we're going to get into some of that a little bit here about some of the challenges we ran into. So by November, so we went October, November. In November, we provided funds for legal fees incurred, and again, I'll fix LLC. I'm sorry about that. For incorporating for Mac Admins Open Source as a nonprofit in Pennsylvania. January rolls around. We get an update from Nate. I don't have the screenshot. I don't know if we want to talk about individuals or call them out. It's probably not appropriate, but
I don't think we do.
No.
I think that would be a terrible idea.
Yeah.
If you want to talk a little bit about what was happening with Apple, and I will seed the information, the name Mac Admins Open Source.
Yes. So it turns out Mac is trademarked. That's the long and the short of it.
And that creates problems.
Yeah.
You may have heard Apple vigorously defends its trademarks.
It wasn't just a one day somebody made it work. You had conversations
Yes.
to try to make a case for why this group can and should be called Mac Admins Open Source. Do you want to give us a little bit of an
Sure.
idea about what that was like?
There's a bunch of, furious nerds typing on the internet, trying to find other people that are using Mac in the App Store and all the other places. We came up with a list of everything that was using Mac in the name, saying, why is it okay for them, but not okay for us? And kind of went through that and kind of provided, some of that. And also talked with a bunch of folks at Apple that, are active in the community, possibly present here this year, etc. And they helped on their end, to get through a lot of that stuff as well. And made the arguments and did whatever magic they needed to do to make it work. But yeah, I literally got a phone call, almost didn't answer it. I'm just going to skip to that, February. I got a phone call, I'm like, I don't know this area code, I'm not answering it. But then I was just like, okay, I guess I will. And then it's like, this is Apple Developer Support. I was like, what? Okay. And then they said it was approved. So I was like, great. And then as soon as we got it, I logged into the account, pinged Eric, and said, hey, let's go sign Nudge real quick because no takebacks, So we literally had it done within like 3 hours. I was just like, we're signing this so that there's something in production available to the public, and it's harder for them to, well, hopefully, please don't call it back, But yeah, we tried to get it done as quickly as we could.
Within
Yes.
minutes. GitHub sends a notification out to people like watching the repo that says that there was an update, there was a commit. And Eric was like, it was supposed to be a nice surprise. Like, you spoiled it for us.
Yeah.
And people noticed in Slack immediately. There's a thread, you can go see it from 5 months ago, whereas people were like, whoa, the team ID changed. There was a blog post from somebody within like half an hour that, hey, Nudge team ID changed. You may need to add it to your approved team IDs for whatever, right? Like, it was the magic of Slack and GitHub, I think, for us. Ooh, my layering is off. But
There's
the
really
visit
kind
is
of a
there.
theme that runs through all of this of surprises being unexpectedly spoiled.
It's true.
So, very excitedly, Nudge was the first project to sign, like, immediately.
And I breathed a sigh of relief.
Yeah, it's out there in
Yeah.
the wild, so to speak, right? And then the floodgates opened a little bit, right? So
Yeah.
what happened next?
So on that side, I started looking for people who had projects. I was targeting mainly people who are doing Swift projects because it's like the easiest win, Swift and Xcode. That's a solved problem. We already did it with Nudge, easy peasy. We can get it done. And I talked to Bart. I don't know if he approached me or if I approached him. I can't remember. It's probably on the public channel, so I have a terrible memory, But we talked about it and discussed signing that, and then moving it over to the Mac Admins org and kind of handling it there. The main reason for that is, so as a sidebar, the reason we want stuff in the org is because we don't want to leak the secrets. We don't want anybody to get our code signing certs because that would be bad for obvious reasons. So we do have kind of some decent security controls around that as much as GitHub allows. And yeah, so we talked about that. We got into the repo and we kind of cut a beta and just kind of went from there. That was the first project from the outside of the GitHub repo that came in.
That kind of got moved in and
Yeah.
adopted under the Mac
Yes.
Admins.
And then Joe Chilcode breathed a sigh of relief because he no longer had to upkeep his version of Outset.
Yes,
Yeah.
Outset moved to Swift from Python. It got a Python 3 update at some point, though, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Before Bart rewrote it in Swift. So then we, as the year continues, right, we get our first signed build of Monkey in the Monkey Builds repo. Yeah. I'm not a Monkey user, so I can't really speak to that all that much. Is there any other story behind that?
Not a whole lot. I know we talked about doing it for a very long time, but for various reasons we didn't. A lot of it was like liability related, and like the ownership of Monkey versus like signing builds and like having that, and Python files in there, and do we really own them? Should we be signing them? All that stuff. And we ended up kind of, as an homage to Tim Sutton's Monkey builds from back in the day, we kind of named the repo the same thing. And then we literally are just taking the latest releases, and then I think Eric has it landed in your repo, right? for doing the actual signing and all that. But we're
Yeah, it's,
we're
it's part of the main build.
yeah. So we have our own workflow that just uses the main repo essentially, and then does the signing. So it's all still in the Monkey repo. Anybody can do it if they want to with their own certs. But we just happen to have a copy that's on a release page on the Mac admins repo.
I think I forgot to mention the drinking game of anytime Eric is mentioned that you're all supposed to drink.
For sure.
So then, fast forward to June, and we get this awesome announcement from Elliot that Netflix is open sourcing a new tool built called Escrow Buddy. So would love to get you to talk about a little bit about that, what that process was like.
Yeah, from the beginning, I kind of was looking at Nudge and the Monkey Builds projects for inspiration. I knew it wasn't really appropriate for me to put on my own GitHub repo. Netflix has an organization that they often post things to, but I wasn't confident that we would be able to manage at Netflix.com like certificates and signing and stuff in a way that everybody would be really happy with. So I saw that already happening on the Mac admins open source repo, and I was like, that's what we need. So from the very beginning, I kind of had that in mind as the eventual destination. So kind of midway through the process of building, at first we wanted to make sure that the thing we were building actually worked. After I was reasonably confident, I reached out to Nate and asked, like, hey, well, what are the chances that we could get on the Mac admins GitHub org?
I think one of the first things was like, is Netflix legal? Is it okay with this?
Yeah.
Like that's my first question. Yeah.
That would actually be my big question, and that might be interesting to everyone, is what was the process
Yeah.
of getting Netflix to agree to let you do this? Because they could have just said, no, this will be internal only. We don't want to, stick our neck out in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
Well, one interesting thing about Netflix is they really do lean into freedom and responsibility, kind of expecting people to act with a certain degree of responsibility with the power that they have, but also giving them a lot of leniency as an employee. People can kind of make their own decisions, and it might be on the borders of what is acceptable, but as long as they're doing it for good reasons, then it's okay. So I kind of felt already like I wasn't approaching the legal team like from a defensive point of view.
Yeah.
I had very good reasons why I thought that this was the right destination, and I explained that. And we went back and forth a few times, and they kind of asked some very basic questions, like what are we committing to? Like, what's the support load going to be? What is the implications of signing with their certificate versus our certificate? How much work would it be for us to host this compared to for them to do it? And after I was able to answer all those questions, I think that everybody kind of like breathes a little bit and like, yeah, this sounds like a pretty good idea. Let's go for that. And I also think that the fact that it's kind of a Mac admins community project and not like a world project. Like it's not like a project that's going to be used by normal consumers and stuff. So the reach, even though I appreciate the hundreds of people who are here and know about the project, it's still not a huge deal in the grand scheme of things.
It also helped that it wasn't within Netflix's core competencies,
Yeah.
for sure.
Right, and we weren't. It wasn't like institutional knowledge that was like a secret. It's not trade secrets or anything.
Right. Yeah.
And there's actually many good examples of Netflix already contributing open source projects to the IT and security.
Spinnaker, right?
Spinnaker,
Mhm.
yeah. Stethoscope
Mhm.
back in the day. So I think that I felt like I was on pretty solid ground when approaching everybody who was involved. The legal team, the communications team, various, like the developers wanted to do a security review, which I kind of breezed through once they realized it wasn't anything that stored any kind of credentials or anything. So it was not too bad.
Cool.
This may be a good point just to step aside a bit and say, are there tools that we've mentioned so far that are part of the Mac admins project that there are folks in the room that would appreciate context on what it does? Are we unfamiliar with anything? No, Escrow Buddy is probably the newest, so maybe would an explainer on Escrow Buddy or some of the other tools? Okay, so can you just give us a
Elevator pitch. Yeah.
Yeah, can you give us an elevator pitch on Escrow Buddy?
Yeah, Escrow Buddy is a tool that's made to help MDM administrators ensure that all their devices have file vault recovery keys escrowed in MDM. It's very similar and based in part on Crypt. Crypt has that same functionality. Crypt's primary use case is to escrow those keys to a Crypt server. It also works to escrow to MDM, and in fact, you can use Crypt instead of Escrow Buddy if you want, but it comes along with a bunch of other stuff. There's Python built in, and most people have a Crypt server that they're administering and a database that they're hosting and all that stuff. This is for people who only want to escrow to MDM and don't want any of those other dependencies. It's kind of like a lightweight, laser-focused file vault escrow to MDM. It basically is the sudo fd setup change recovery dash personal. That's really the core functionality at the core of it. But it does that at the login window,
Right.
so you don't actually need to prompt them for any credentials extra to that, and that's already a trusted process for them. So just wait till the next login, and they log in, and then you give a new key escrow to
Yeah. It's kind of like the idea that you're staging something that's going to happen without specific user interaction. So, some of the other re-escrow tools out there require a prompt with a password or something like that. This is made to stage, so you can just kind of have something rolling, and when a device all of a sudden has an invalid key, which is how Jamf Pro kind of refers to it, right? You can just stage escrow buddy to re-get that key for you. Without the user even really knowing that they need to do it. They probably don't even know their key is invalid in the first place to know they need to do any remediation, right? So it's kind of a seamless process for the end user.
Yeah, it gets escrowed whenever the next RSR comes out, right? You just reboot, for the updates and then get it escrowed.
Yeah,
That's-
if the authentication database hasn't changed.
Ah,
the authentication database.
got it.
It's like an authorized
Which I'll be writing a blog post on that.
Good,
soon,
good.
but yeah.
Oh, yes, I see, yes.
Yeah, because if you think about, like, we were talking about this internally, we have an SLA of 14 days for OS updates because of UK Cyber Essentials requirements, right? So we would know within 14 days that escrow buddy would catch and re-escrow an invalid key if that's the case, right? So depending on your SLAs on when reboots might happen for OS updates and something like that, it could be pretty quick remediation without you even really knowing you need to do it, right? It's just kind of set and forget. That's kind of the beauty of it. And then hopefully at the end of the day, your support team isn't saying, we need a key because someone can't get into their Mac and there's no key on their computer record or whatever the case may be, right? Which I know every organization runs into once in a while.
Literally the worst.
We also mentioned monkey builds. Are there any other tools that people would like? Or about Outset, should we give you a little context on Outset? Is everyone here familiar with the Outset tool? Essentially, I always, and it's not a fair comparison, it's like an extension attribute in Jamf Pro. I'm sorry, I'm a Jamfy person, I can't help it, right? It's a way to get really interesting bits of information that you need off a device and then report it somewhere that you need it, right? At the end of the day. Okay, Greg, correct me.
I mean, maybe you can do some of that stuff with it, but the main impetus behind Outset was sort of a framework so that you could run scripts or install things at specific times, like at boot.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I'm thinking of, what's the other one?
Yeah.
Unearth. I explained
right.
Unearth, which is unrelated. I'm very sorry. Yes,
And-
please, thank you for correcting
Right.
me.
So Chilcote wrote one originally wrote it in Python, and then when Apple yanked Python, supporting it became a nightmare, and then Bart rewrote it in Swift.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's just at its core, you install it, and then if you want something to run at boot, you drop a script in a certain folder. If you want something to run at login, you drop it into a different folder, and that's it. That's
Actually,
really simple tool.
something
Yeah.
of note that's really funny to me. The Outset version is based on Chilcote's version, which is based on my Bash version, which is based on a conversation we had, I think on IRC at the time, where you described something similar that you had done, and then I re-implemented it, in Bash for whatever reason. And it's just kind of now 4 generations later.
Now is it Swift?
Hopefully it's
Yeah.
a little better now.
No, has to be. Has to be.
Thank you. I just thought it might be worth calling out some of the tools that people were unfamiliar. So in June, also notorious for WWDC, right? And we get new updates on what's going on
Yes.
in management and all those goodies. So do you want to give us a little talk? You want to just kind of cover what some of the declarative testing and infrastructure and why you did this?
Sure, yeah. So, as it is when betas come out, you want to try to get feedback in as early and as often as you possibly can. I stood up, we have a domain, macadmins.io, and I spun up a droplet and just kind of got some Docker containers up for CamFDDM, which is written by Jesse Peterson. And it works with Nano, I think, or Micro, but definitely Nano MDM. And it's declarative management. It's very raw. You give it a JSON payload that is basically what Apple says in the YAML files on their GitHub page for the declarative stuff, and it does the thing. And the only way you can really validate is by looking locally or checking the logs on the server and kind of messing with it. But the one thing that was constantly drilled into us by also certain people who may or may not be here that work for a fruit company was test the software update functionality. So we were doing that. and making sure that worked well and better than the previous version, which I'm happy to say it seems to, but we are still banging on it, and I haven't gotten Sam a DDM server yet, so I'm sure he'll break it in creative ways. But we are trying to make sure that's pretty solid so we can use that. And hopefully, like in an ideal world, Nudge will be, the backup hammer plan where, you just put it in, jerk mode straight away after the install date. Because, the DDM stuff should be better on a whole. But our goal was we want to kind of test all the DDM payloads and then publicly have those things documented. We actually have a DDM examples repo up on the GitHub, Mac Admin's GitHub. And Jesse recently wrote a Python script that basically you clone the repo, run his Python script, and it applies all the JSON payloads in the entire repo or whatever set you tell it to. And you can kind of then go through and test everything. Golby is helping me out with this too. Where is he in here?
Yeah, he's
There.
right over there.
And we were kind of banging on it and trying to figure out what was broken. He broke SSHD, so that was good. It was a great find. Is this still broken? Still broken. But like the ZSH stuff is tested and working, and there's a couple other managed service configs, or I always get that backwards, that are working pretty well. And those are exciting because they're untouchable by end users. So you put them there, they are protected, they can't mess with it in theory. And that's kind of an interesting new feature that I was pleasantly, I was delighted by when I saw it at the WWDC talk. And we jumped on that right away and tried to get that testing. So if anybody here really wants to dig into KMF DDM and doesn't mind sending raw JSON payloads to test this, let me know.
Is Rich going to ask why Chris keeps laughing?
Well, that's a separate question. But,
Yes.
I wanted to ask folks in the audience, how many of you are familiar with the concept of declarative device management? Okay. How many would like to know more about it? I have a session for you tomorrow morning. After breakfast, introduction
Yes.
Rich, you're a great pitch guy. I love it.
Chris, why are you laughing?
Because KMF DDM is the best project name ever.
Why is that?
You got to give our.
Is not here to explain.
No, he's not.
Is it safe to Google?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
Just want to
yeah,
make
yeah.
sure.
Yeah, wax
Yeah.
tracks. Yeah, so that kind of brings us up to now-ish.
Was that?
Now-ish. We're at our timeline of future,
Oh, yes.
which we are stepping into at every moment that we're here, right?
Yes.
So do you want to talk a little bit about what you think is maybe coming next, or maybe some other projects?
Well, to be honest, I have no clue. Like Elliot came to us, and I believe Bart did too. So it really depends upon people who are working on projects and want to give back to the community. Just asking in Slack, really. As I said, a lot of us, have families and full-time jobs and all that stuff. So we really don't have a whole lot of headspace to sit and be super strategic about this. But distributed community work gets it done, and that's really how it is for a lot of the projects that are on the Mac Admin's repo. And, Monkey itself has many different contributors. And that's helped make it better along the way. So that's kind of our attitude at the moment. If I get more time, hopefully I'll have actual documentation that's public and all that stuff, but have not done that yet. Maybe for the 1 year anniversary. But yeah, so if anybody has an interesting project idea, I think right now we're still, as a filter function, I'm still kind of saying, Swift or compiled languages are most ideal, and then maybe Python. We did Monkey, I think, because of the shim. That's technically compiled, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a shim there that is really what makes the magic work, and that's part of the reason that we did that. I don't love the idea of signing off Python either, but for this use case, I think it was a good idea. So for those reasons, we're trying to avoid scripts at the moment. But only because I don't know what that will really entail long term.
Actually, signing the Python isn't required for all of this to work.
Right.
The signing
Just
the
the shim.
Python is only so that the whole thing can be notarized.
Yes.
So if notarization is not important to
Correct.
you, then you can get away, you can sign much, much less. The only thing you would actually need to sign would be the shim itself.
Indeed. Yeah.
But when you notarize something, everything inside the thing that gets delivered has to be signed.
That's right. Signed all the way down.
Are there other projects under the Mac Admins GitHub org umbrella worth calling out? I think UMAD is in there, right? Which is the encourage user enrolled to do.
If someone wants to rewrite that in Swift, I'd be so happy. but yeah, that's one. I know there's OSQuery extensions in there as well. I don't think we're signing those. But there's a couple of
Screenshot
things
it
in there.
for it.
Yeah, I should really just make a list of everything that we're actually signing and have that published somewhere. As you can see, our website is super fancy right now, and that was just for verification for the developer account. Because like, if you actually have a website, it makes Apple happier than if you don't have a website.
And Mastodon or whatever, right? It
Yes,
really
yes,
cares
Mastodon
about
as well for validation. Absolutely.
validation, yeah.
So I have a question. In terms of the GitHub organization, how many contributors, maintainers do you have on the projects that you have?
Very few actually. So it's a lot of I don't want to say pet projects, but it's kind of that, or passion projects. It's like, Eric has Nudge and Elliot has Escrow Buddy and Bart is focused on Outset. And I guess I'm a bureaucrat. I don't know.
You talk to the lawyers.
Indeed,
you
right?
sign the
Yeah, exactly,
paperwork,
exactly.
yeah.
So that's kind of where we're at right now. But yeah, there's not a lot. There's not a huge core group that is active across multiple projects. It's a lot of individual projects that are kind of under the umbrella, and kind of in one place.
Have you looked at any kind of active recruitment efforts looking for new folks?
No, not yet. Here, I was hoping to just talk with people and do it kind of organically. That's the idea. But yeah, so if you're interested in helping out or want to get involved, definitely chat with me. I'm definitely open to it. I am. So I'm at a startup and I was on vacation last week, so I'm catching up this week while at the conference. But I will still make time for anyone who wants to talk. So it's all good.
Question.
Mm-hmm.
My perception, maybe this is wrong, maybe you can correct it, is that people's personal GitHub projects, like my Recipe Robot project is on my personal GitHub, are a little bit like, I worry sometimes about those disappearing. Like
Yeah.
if only one person has control over that repo, and a lot of people use it and depend on it, if that repo were to disappear overnight, or if somebody got locked out or hacked or something like that, that could potentially affect a lot of people. Is there, is like the redundancy or the safety factor of having an organization host a crucial project to the community part of your thought process?
Yeah, for sure. And in fact, when we were starting to ramp up, I went through and like pruned out all the old projects that were not being actively updated or had maintainers who were, had moved on. Because a lot of people move on to other jobs, non-Mac admin jobs, and they don't have the time or the energy or the scratch to itch, so to speak, anymore. So yeah, I reached out to everybody who had ever done a project and kind of like cleaned up there. But also, yeah, it's we have like, I don't know, we have like 4 people who are owners on there. It's everybody on the board is an owner. And that's also intentional. We want to have backups and alternates and all that.
Right.
We want to be 100% bust proof, as it were. And yeah, that's definitely a feature of being on the repo.
Would you urge?
I'm driving.
For the recording, the reference was if somebody gets hit by the lottery bus, right? And they're done, right? What's the redundancy behind them?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Or we're also physically getting on a bus tonight to go to an event. Yes, that was the concern, I believe.
That's true. Main concern.
So if somebody's currently hosting a personal GitHub
Yes.
project like me,
Yes.
would you encourage them to consider maybe switching that over to the Mac Admins org, or is there like a higher threshold for that?
That's a good question. If it's actively maintained and I don't want to say like novel in that regard, but like, if it's actively maintained and it looks like it's a good fit for like kind of, the other things that are on the repo, I think that would be good. Like, I don't want to have a whole, like having a bunch of overlap is not ideal. But also we don't want it to just be a place to throw things, like yeet it over the wall. So long as it's actively maintained and people are interested in keeping it maintained, then yeah, for sure, I'll consider almost anything. as long as it's relevant.
And for now, like the first tier is probably Swift.
Yes,
so no
correct.
type stuff.
Correct. Swift, Go, Rust, if you're a masochist. I mean,
Wow. That's probably a good transition to kind of a general Q&A conversation situation in the room. I have a feeling we're going to have some. We've got the little box to pass
Yeah.
around. It looks like we already have some. Perfect.
Thank you for your accurate estimation of my catching ability.
Nice.
As a follow-up regarding something like an open source project that's on GitHub that's currently in a private or personally owned, not a private repo, but if there are projects that are actively maintained or looking for contributors or additional assistance or whatever, and they're hosted or transferred to the MacAdmin's GitHub, how would the original owner, I guess, maintain ownership or control over it if that repo is owned by the four of you?
Good question. So the way it works with Elliot and Bart they're owners on the repo. They're not admins, but they are, the highest level just below admin. And the reason for that is if you have admin, you can mess with secrets, and that's one of the things that we're trying to protect. But yeah, so like we require 2FA. So if you don't have 2FA on your account, you must add it to be added to any of the repos. There's no two ways about that. And then, but yeah, you have full control over the repo, including, merging the main and dealing with issues and triaging and all that stuff. And that's kind of one of the other things. Like if you're interested in that, the expectation I think also would be that if people are putting in issues, you're maintaining those and responding and closing and all that stuff, and just kind of nurturing the project essentially. Pull requests, yeah, issues and pull requests both.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, most importantly, code review for pull requests. Yeah, no blind YOLO lands, please. It's not ideal.
That was a point that came up very early in the
Yeah.
who's doing what. We were like, I don't know if we want the board of the MacAdmins Foundation to be the ones to decide like if this code is good or not. We're just not, for a lot of these projects, the individuals in particular on the board are just not those people, right? Nate and the folks he mentioned that are on the board of the MacAdmins open source group are those people, right? And hopefully that will continue to expand and grow, and volunteers will help it, and we'll figure that stuff out going forward.
On personal projects, a lot of people just commit to main and push.
Yes.
But
Right.
In this repository,
Yes.
people are expected to commit to a branch and
Pull requests.
create a pull request. Ideally, there's some kind of a CI/CD workflow that validates that pull request and then merge it into main, and then it gets published automatically. It's a little bit more buttoned up type workflow.
Yeah, and like ideally we would like to do code review on everything that goes in, but like right now it's just a bandwidth issue. So if you're say, like it's like they talk about actors, if you're a Swift type or a Python type or a Ruby type and you'd like to do code review, definitely let me know on that side too, because we could use help on the code review side. And that itself is useful and helpful. Even like I'll ask questions about code I have no idea about, like what does this do and why, and even that's helpful for the person doing the development because it might make them see something that wasn't there before. So yeah, any questions and all questions and things like that are helpful a lot of the times.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else in the room have any other questions or comments for the panel?
You were going to say something, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, but I forgot what it was.
Rich has something.
And just to go along with the idea of code review and other stuff, you don't necessarily have to be, writing code to contribute
Yep.
to be helpful.
Indeed.
So, it's documentation is something that doesn't really work
Yes.
for writing, but it is hugely important to write good documentation for tools, especially open source tools.
There's a good heuristic for that. If you go to any of the repos and you think, okay, how do I use this? It's a great opportunity to write some documentation for how to use that. Figure it out, ask questions from the people, the writer of the code, and then write the documentation.
Yeah.
100%.
There are definitely people out there who believe that code can be self-documented
Yeah.
and fundamentally disagree with all.
And even things like spell checking, like just checking existing code to make sure that like the numbers go in order and that things are
No,
spelled correctly.
don't say that. Nick might hear you.
I know people have been kind of negged or something for small
Yeah.
contributions like that in repos, but they're very important.
Yeah.
I would rather look more professional and have my stuff spelled correctly by, somebody else catching a mistake. and
Absolutely.
fixing it. So, yeah, any kind of contribution like that.
Yeah,
is
because
absolutely welcome.
when you're it's 1 a.m. and you're falling asleep at the keyboard, you might not spell everything right. So it's
Exactly.
definitely good to have someone watching your back. Oh,
So, Greg, I know you have a session later about the past, current, and future of Monkey, but I can't help but notice that Monkey hasn't been consumed into this. Is that at all on the future of Monkey, or is Monkey going to stay in its own org at the moment?
That's a good question. I don't really have a great answer for that, other than I wasn't comfortable with the idea of just moving the entire project. First off, Disney would not have allowed that, because it is a Disney animation project, at least it was originally. That's changed. Disney Animation does not claim any special control over it right now, and I could move it under Mac admins if I wanted to. And actually, something we'll talk about at the session tomorrow. What is the right thing to do? Should Monkey be independent? Should it go under Mac admins? Should it stay? What is that? I don't know. It can't keep going the way it is, which is me as the only owner of the repo. Because I'm getting on a bus to go get some ice cream and stuff.
I mean, not to mention how much would it break in the world if you moved the repo?
Well, one hopes that there are copies of this thing around, so people could be able to reconstruct it. But yeah, you don't
Right.
you don't want to put people down.
I think GitHub redirects, but still,
Yeah. Any other questions from the room? Oh, Bryson's got one in the back over there. Uh-oh.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeet.
that.
Oh, nice.
Oh no!
Oh,
Recovery.
10 out of 10.
That was intentional. Alright, so say we move projects into here. Like code reviewers are kind of, in short supply. But would we be able to source other members of the Mac admins community who are proficient in, say, like Python to become reviewers on projects for that pull request process? So that way it's not so much a burden on the board.
Yes, please.
So like when you say that we still
Yes.
retain control of the repos, like we're able to add external members as, say, like reviewer permissions on the repo so that they can do things like mark pull requests as approved.
Correct. Yeah, we do that as like external collaborators, but yes, absolutely. The main point of the admin level control is strictly for the secrets and the security stance of the repos. That's it. And the only other thing that we really set up is protecting the main branch, so you can't push direct. That's just another thing that's just good security hygiene. But beyond that, yeah, if you have folks that are in your org or at your company that are good reviewers, definitely invite them to review your code there too. Because there are people that will see the code review and might even learn something from it on that side too. It's really good to have that in public and seeing how the code reviews go.
So follow-up question is for making sure that these projects are following healthy CI/CD workflows. Is the foundation footing the GitHub Actions bill?
Well, I believe. Was it Diego? I think you got us.
Someone.
I
don't. Well,
I forget.
I'm
So
always like, do we
have
wanna
GitHub Pro
say that they
for
did some
teams.
handshakes?
So we have 3,000
Yes.
minutes a month at this point. If we get close to exceeding that, then we'll be like,
Well, this column is like the power
Yeah.
of the community, right?
Exactly.
We represent so many organizations, including organizations like GitHub that we use, right?
yeah.
And the power of the community is that when that need arises, people step up and say, let me go shoot an email to a colleague about this, right? Let's have a conversation. Do you need me to help set up a meeting with somebody? Like that happens a lot with this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I will also call out that so much of this collaboration and discussion around these types of things happens on Slack.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and also to tag on to that, it's like it's not, there's no magic involved here. It's literally just people saying, hey, is it cool if we do this? That's literally it. And then just kind of seeing where it goes from there. So nobody should be afraid of ever reaching out
Totally.
or asking on channel. It's just open, and it's how this has always been since I've been here anyways. Since 2011. It's just kind of been that way. From IRC to Slack to GitHub, Google Code, then GitHub. It's just been a bunch of people that are interested and passionate about it, talking and getting stuff done. So, yeah. Which channel?
Which channel?
Oh, yes, that's a good point. I think it's on one of the slides there, but...
Yeah, I'm sorry. It looks a little small. That's not too bad.
Yeah,
So
okay.
there is
It's
a Mac Admin's open source.
Dash, yes.
There's a dash in there.
Yes.
On the Mac Admin Slack. If you want to ask questions, if you want to volunteer yourself or maybe volunteer others, as Bryson kind of implied there, that's
Exactly.
probably a good place
It's a good
to
place.
start. Yeah.
And then, if we get into collaboration, we do have a collaboration channel as well. That's it's private right now. It probably could be public. I don't know. I need to think about that a little bit more. But I want to make sure that as much is public as we can possibly make public, essentially. But yeah, so to answer your question, yes, external reviewers are welcome, and so long as the code quality is I don't have time to police code quality. Let's be honest. So if it's your project and you care about it, you will care about code quality, in my view, and you will care about the people that you're inviting to do the code review, and I trust that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think I missed this, but is reviewing the pull request mandatory? Like someone else review it in order to merge?
One person, yes. Yeah.
So what about auto PKG? Is that something that
That's
could be signed?
technically under a different organization right now.
It is.
right?
It's under its own org. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty complicated org with the recipe repos.
Talking about breaking stuff. Talking about breaking stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
At least it's soft.
That's actually one of the reasons why I didn't want to move Monkey, at least immediately into that organization, because I don't know who would, I'm going to do a pull request of my own code and then wait for Nate to say no.
Indeed. Indeed.
That just felt wrong to me, so.
Yeah.
I mean, something
We
like
love
that
you,
does
Nate,
have to happen
but-
eventually,
Yeah.
but I wasn't ready.
Yeah, and
I'm not emotionally ready for that.
But in fact, the intent is you as the owner of the code repo should have the say whether it gets merged or not from external, contributors. So if you have somebody that does a one-off PR, they shouldn't just be able to merge it in there. That's a terrible idea. So yeah, essentially.
And I think for a project like AutoPackage, where there are multiple related, very similar repositories, having its own organization actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And giving people team access to a specific repo within that org,
Mhm.
that kind of flexibility wouldn't really fit under the Mac Admin's org.
Not as it is today, that's for sure. Yeah.
Do you foresee the Mac Admin's open source group / the developer account and what it unlocks as being what do you see as potential? I don't want to say service offerings because it's not appropriate. I'm just trying to figure out a way to frame it. What other tools do you think that access now potentially provides to projects or initiatives maybe in the community?
Well, this is kind of not really in the release notes, but is definitely the case. You can get an MDM CSR function on your developer account now without having an enterprise developer account. So the Mac Admin's open source account has that. So I talked to Jesse Peterson about moving MDM cert.download over to that. We haven't decided if we're going to do that yet or not, but it's something we certainly have talked about. But that does open up, if you want to spin up micro or nano MDM, that could be issued under, the same account essentially as the code signing. And that's just one thing. So the DDM servers I stood up, they were still under MDM certs.download. I can't remember the website. I think that's right. Which is Jesse's MDM CSR, but all the other infrastructure was under Mac Admin's open source. So we are offering, if you will put in the time to test DDM stuff, I'm happy to spin you up your own personal DDM server on our droplet because they're very lightweight. It's only 1 or 2 machines at a time, and you can bang on it and figure out what's going to break and all that and give feedback. And that's all useful for everybody. And I'm happy to do that. It takes me 5 minutes to set up. It's not long at all. And I could probably automate it if I wasn't being lazy. But it's 5 minutes, so not a big deal at all. So that's just like another kind of thing that we're doing and have the ability to do now that we have, you know, an actual org for this stuff.
Awesome. I wanted to comment on a couple things. I'm assuming you're set up as a nonprofit, correct?
Correct.
So GitHub does give nonprofits a team plan.
Correct. Pro, yeah.
And also
team,
with
yeah.
GitHub Actions, I'm doing a talk on that tomorrow.
Yes.
And any repo that's public
Yes.
has unlimited number of minutes, and you're not charged for those.
Oh, interesting. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there we
A
go.
lot of people don't know, so.
I did not.
Have you thought about getting funds from Microsoft as well? I know they do, I think it's $3,500 in Azure credits a year. You could run a lot of stuff.
I think maybe to take that question on a little bit to
Yes.
start, we would love it if Microsoft sponsored the Mac Admins Foundation so
Yes.
that some of those dollars would go to exactly the kind of thing you're talking about or others.
Yeah.
We want what the Mac Admins Foundation offers is the ability for Nate's group to come to us and say, we have this new functionality that we want to provide through this account. Can the Mac Admins Foundation provide the funding for it? Yeah, and we're able to do that by people donating to our nonprofit, so we can then pay that forward into the community for those types of needs. So that would, I think, to start.
Yeah.
Until Mac Admins Open Source is a U.S. IRS recognized 501c3 with the ability to directly
Yes.
take donations. The method to start would be to donate to the Mac Admins Foundation so that when that need arises, Nate or others who work on these types of projects can come to us and we can help fund them.
Yeah, if I can
Yeah.
jump in on that answer, one of the core missions that the Mac Admins Foundation has adopted around that is kind of taking on some of that, complicated, annoying bureaucratic infrastructure stuff in lieu of other organizations needing to. And so, to the extent that Mac Admins Open Source might eventually want to build out that infrastructure on their own, that's a fantastic thing. It shows organizational maturity, things like that. But at the same time, one of the reasons that we're here at the foundation is to be able to say, we want to help facilitate this for you and make it easier so you can focus on the actual work that you're doing.
And to be honest, we would like to get a 501c3, is that right? But only for the reason that Google will give you free services,
Yeah.
Microsoft will give you free services. I have, even with the PA nonprofit, I have free services from DigitalOcean right now. So I'm actually not paying for the droplet. They're like, get through this $60 credit and we might give you more. So, as soon as we burn through that, I'll do that. But all that to say, even if we had that, I don't think I'm super interested in bifurcating the fundraising ability within the community. You know what I
Right.
mean? I would rather do it under the Mac Admins Foundation solely for the purpose of, being unified and not having to split that in any way, And I don't want it to be that, I want it to be all in a unified fashion essentially. And then also fundraising events, really hard. And yeah, exactly. And that's something I'm also super not interested in, I'm more interested in the technical stuff.
We are so grateful for our sponsors making this type of thing possible, and we do have some in the room. So, if you were I should let Rich speak to the dollars a little bit. He's our treasurer, right? But if you saw the pie chart, corporate sponsors are a big part of why we're able to invest in the community like this.
Yeah, and also as the treasurer of the Mac Admins Foundation, I'm the one who's working with our accountants to prepare our taxes.
Yes.
Well, to prepare our tax statements,
There you go.
which involve just as much paperwork as paying actual taxes.
Yeah.
So if that is something that we can centralize within the Mac Admins Foundation and Mac Admins Open Source doesn't have to deal with any of it, I think we're both much happier.
Yeah, just take the pressure off, right? We want to do that infrastructure type work, right, that Chris mentioned, to take the pressure off of the community projects so that the maintainers of them can focus on what they're providing to the community and the organizations that are using it. Yeah.
For sure.
Did we have any other questions in the room?
If there's no more questions, I have one quick.
Yeah.
So talking about getting hit by the lottery bus, the Powerball, is at 1 billion right now.
Oh boy.
Sweet.
And the drawing's tonight, so if anyone sees any of these folks walking towards a store that sells lotto tickets, deviate them to the creamery or something, you know, shiny object, but, so. That's
But you
all.
just inceptioned everyone, so they have to do that now.
We're just talking about raising funds.
Yeah.
The comment was we were just talking about raising funds, just for the recording in case they missed it. I do want to give the panel an opportunity if there are any other, we've got about 7 minutes left. Were there any other
Yeah.
topics that we wanted to try to cover with this group or on this topic with this audience today? We're all like holding our breath for this nugget of wisdom from Krista and then nothing.
We could just throw the catch box back and forth for the rest of the time.
Greg, you mentioned some thoughts from me earlier. Did you want to cover a little bit of that or no? Just general thoughts about future projects and implications around signing and stuff like that. Do you
I'll
remember?
pull a Rich. Come to my session tomorrow.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I was gonna say no spoiler alerts. No
I
spoilers, no spoilers.
I T-balled that for you.
As like a relatively recent joiner of the contributors, I'll say the process couldn't have been simpler. I just basically pinged Nate and said, hey, would you be interested in this? You know, we kind of kicked the ball back and forth with some ideas. And it was very low pressure. I felt like I could have backed out at any time and it wouldn't have been a big deal.
All good.
If it had fallen through on the company's end, it wouldn't have been a big deal. Like we would have found another way. So it was all very low pressure, very easy. And I feel like it's setting up escrow to be really well maintained in the future, either by me or by whoever, because it's not reliant on one single point of contribution.
Yeah.
So I would encourage anybody who has an idea in the back of their head, like for a Mac admin project or maybe an existing project that you're maintaining, if you think that it serves the community need and fits the criteria that you're looking for, don't hesitate to ask the team, because it was very easy for me.
Channel, please.
Yeah.
Yes, because like we got like into the conversation. I was like, oh, I should probably loop everybody else in. Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
And then
I'm not even sure I was aware of the channel before
Yeah.
before you mentioned it.
Yeah.
It was a very easy flow into that.
Definitely.
I got preceded one question, I think it was last week, or it was a comment from someone jokingly saying, nice flannel shirt and shorts. And I don't think anyone up here is wearing a flannel shirt and shorts, so I think
Nope.
the joke fell a little flat on him. I'll make sure to fill him in later. We have 5 minutes. We can wrap a little early. I do want to call out a few things. You may be leaving thinking like, how can I support this even if I don't contribute code, or maybe even I don't use these projects, but I think this is just really important. Because I think it's really important. The Mac Admins Foundation thinks it's really important. I think there are a lot of people in the room who think it's important and find value in it, right? So I mentioned before the Mac Admins Foundation and having funding to continue to provide funds into the community in places where it's needed for initiatives like this. If you want to find ways to support those things, donating to the Mac Admins Foundation, which is equipped to take those donations, is a good way to do that. You can also volunteer time. If you're like, I'll speak for like the Jamfs in the room. We have a platform called Benevity, and it has volunteer time off and hours that you can track. So if your organization has something comparable and you volunteer time to maybe go to the Mac Admins repo, GitHub pages, and you want to spruce up macadmins.io with more documentation or something like that, or a mission or whatever, log your time with your employer. You can then pay that. Usually there's dollars to pay for it and donations and stuff like that. Mac Admins Foundation is listed in most charitable programs that organizations use for corporate giving. It's a great way to support these types of things, because this is exactly what we want the 501c3 that we built to do. This is exactly the kind of thing we want to be equipped to support financially.
And many organizations will match that donation.
Yes, and that's the thing too. Like I always bring up Jamf. I work there, so it's just a relevant example to me. When we do board activity, I file VTO hours. I get Benevity dollars that I can then donate to the Mac Admins Foundation, and then you can go in and we have a member of the Jamf Nation Global Foundation. Are you still a board member? Yeah, Sean here. But you can also set up usually either through DonorBox on our website or through any giving platform your organization may use. Like me, for example, I give $10 a month to the Mac Admins Foundation, and then Jamf matches another $10, so $20 a month goes to the Mac Admins Foundation. Your organization may have something comparable, and we are listed in most of those platforms. You can also buy merch and do stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know what you need someone to volunteer for? A logo.
That's a good point.
If you have a side project where you do design work, or you know someone that does, that wants to volunteer some work to Mac Admin's open source and the foundation with some design work for a logo,
We are very
would love
utilitarian right now, yes.
Would love that.
I have an idea about that we should discuss offline.
Okay.
Also, if you have any feedback or things you would like to see, that's also very valuable conversation to have. So if there's something you'd like to see from the Mac Admin's GitHub or something that is, lacking, definitely give that feedback. All feedback is welcome, for sure.
Thank you so much to our panelists for this conversation and all the work you're doing to support open source projects in our community. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm so glad you're here at the conference. In about 15 minutes, 4:45, we'll be taking a picture of everyone in Mac Admin's Foundation garb on the staircase by our table. Please join us if you'd like for the picture.